we'll understand what is VCS first. VCS means version control system. VCS now version control. So why VCS is very important? We'll understand what is the use of VCS and why it is very important. Okay, you are consider you are a developer. You can be a Java developer, you can be a Python developer, you can work on any technology, but you are working on some particular development. Right? You are working on some particular file. So where you will keep all these files? So there should be some common repository. So there should be some common file system where these files needs to be stored. From there, others can pick and work. Example, in our team, we have 5 members. You are working on one feature. Example, person 1 is working on some feature called feature 1. Person 2 is working on some feature called feature 2. Person 3 is working on some feature called feature 3. Application is same. Okay, in a single application we will be having multiple features, multiple modules. Each and every module will be developed by individual developers or testers. If you are developing automation testing code, then you will be working on sign up, you will be working on login, you will be working on some other functionality. So each and every developer will work on the individual model. So it has to be collaborated somewhere and it has to be stored in a common file system. Common file system, it needs to be stored. That place is called as VCS, version control system. So what is the meaning of version control here? Example, this person is working on feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, all together is pushed in a common system. Consider feature 1 is being developed, 2 is being developed, 3 is being developed, and individually persons are trying to put all the code in the repository. Repository la code try பண்றாங்க. But see, suddenly client comes and asks you to change the feature 1. Feature 1 you have already developed and it is already there in repository. And the client comes to you and he is asking you to change the feature 1. Feature 1 is initially he has given some other requirement, but now he has changed the requirement. What you need to do? You need to take out all the existing code which is there in repository, because in repository is already in place. Feature 1 code is already in place. That needs to be removed, and the new requirement, whatever the new requirement he has given, for that you need to do the development and same has to be added in your repository. It's a very hectic work for us. See, for 1 or 2 changes it is okay. Consider is keep on telling many changes. After completing the second feature and second requirement, he is again coming and saying you need to change this. So you need to maintain the control of versions. That is why it is called as VCS. Example, in feature 1 he has developed something. இதுக்கு வந்து version 1 ன்னு வச்சுக்கலாம். We call this as V1. Okay, again in feature 1 itself I am getting a new change. He is giving a new requirement that is called as V2, and V3 is another new requirement he is giving. Another new requirement he is giving V4, V5. Like this, he is keep on adding, and finally he is coming and saying, "No, I don't want last 2 versions. எனக்கு கடைசியா develop பண்ண V4, V5 I don't want. I need V3 to be recovered." So in this case, how do you recover V3? Okay, so he has given many requirements to us. He is asking to remove the last 2 requirements, meaning he needs V3. How this V3 can be restored? So for this you need a system which captures all these changes. For V1, what is the change you are doing? For V2, what is the change you are doing? For V3, what is the change you are doing? V4, what is the change you are doing? V5, what is the change you are doing? And you should be in a position to remove V4 and V5 because he needs V3 now. So for this, version has to be maintained. These files needs to be tracked. So that is why VCS comes into picture, version control system. So this is one of the advantage. Main thing is for maintaining version is to manage. You can manage the versions easily. Whenever change comes or change has to be removed, the versions can be managed efficiently. In WhatsApp, you are getting many versions, right? WhatsApp, we are getting new features day by day, or weekly once, monthly once we are getting. What happens when we have got a broken version? For example, the latest version is not working. Then what they will do? They will roll back everything and they will move back to the final older version. That is older version of the current version. Current version முன்னாடி ஒரு older version இருக்கும்ல அதுக்கு வந்து revert பண்ணுவாங்க. How this is possible with the help of VCS? In VCS, all the versions are being tracked. So this is one of the use. The first use is to control the version. So don't think it is applicable only in production. No, you can apply this VCS anywhere. Test environment, pre-prod or production, anywhere it is applicable. Okay, that is one use. Second one is you will get a common repository. It is acting like a common repository. What do you mean by common repository? If I am on leave today and this feature needs to be developed today itself, and one more person is there in my team, whether he can pull the code and work on the feature given, yes, he can do, because we are having all the code in a repository system. We have a repository system. From there, he can pull the code and he can work on. That is another use. Third one is branching and merging. You no need to work on only one single copy of application or application code. You can create n number of copy by using branches. We'll be seeing the concept of branching, how to create different branches. So there is a default branch in Git or GitHub called master or main, master or main. From there you can develop any number of feature branches. Okay. So these are all the advantages of or uses of version control system. Version control system main use is to maintain the version, so that whatever the changes you are doing on the particular file or particular project will be tracked completely. For each and every change there will be a track. So that is the use of VCS. Second one is it is acting like a common repository, so that any person in your team can go and use the system, go and use the repo. Third one is it has many features like branching, merging, and we can use multiple fork, and you can add plugins there. There are many features available. So conventional way of VCS is very simple. We have a repository. Consider we have a repository, and there are multiple users are working in. User 1, 2, 3, 4. So he is user 1, he is working on some feature development or module development. He is user 2, he is user 3, he is user 4. What will happen in this case is everyone will try to push the code into the same repository, the dedicated branch they are working. Finally, it has to be merged. That is a different part. But this is the architecture of conventional VCS system, version control system. Here also version is managed, but it is not in a proper format. It is not in a proper way. That is why distributed version control system comes into picture. Okay, in VCS, what is happening? I develop some code. I am pushing the same in my repository in the dedicated branch. User 2 is also doing the same thing. And in feature 1, user 1 is modifying the same file again, and version is getting captured, and it is being tracked. Whatever the file changes he is done, that is being tracked, and because we are using centralized repository. But in distributed VCS, what is happening is you will be having two levels of repo. You will be having two levels of repo. One is called as local repository, another one is called as centralized repository or remote repository. So let us see how this uh, distributed VCS works. So distributed version control system, how this works is you have a remote repository. In this case, there also it is remote. It can be remote or it can be local. See, it is based on the company need. Okay, GitHub can be hosted in your own server also. இப்போ என் கம்பெனிக்கு ஒரு சர்வர் வச்சு அதுலேயே கூட கிட்டப்பை நான் ஹோஸ்ட் பண்ணிக்கலாம். it no need to be in cloud or no need to be in internet. It can be local server also. But what is the remote repository means? What is the common and final copy of the code? Final copy of the code should be maintained there. Okay, final copy should be maintained in the main or master branch. That is, and it should be act like a distributed system, so that all the users can go and use. But how this distributed version control works is you will be having two levels of repository. One is remote repository, another one is local repository. So similar to the above, இங்கேயும் users இருப்பாங்க, user 1, 2, 3, 4. But instead of pushing the code directly to the central repository system, what they will do is they will push the code into the, they will commit the code into the separate repository called the local repository. This is nothing but the local repository. Here also the complete tracking of version control is happening. So this is also acting like a VCS system. But what is happening here, for each and every use, there will be a local Git installed. There will be a local repository available. You are working in some project. For the project, locally there will be a repository created where you can manage all your commits. You can track all your changes locally and locally change பண்ணலாம். Instead of pushing everything into the central repository or remote repository, you can manage everything in the local repository first, then you can push all the changes into remote repository. So this is called as remote repository. So what the user will do is, example, user 1 is working on some particular feature development. He will commit the changes to local repository first. From local repository, it will go to the, he will push the code into where the remote repository. Here also branching concepts comes. Okay, branching we will see the later sessions. Branching and merging. What is, as of now, consider both local and remote is having one branch, that is main or master branch. To how to create the local repository. Local repository can be created with the help of different lines. We have example tortoise git, git bash. So what we have downloaded now is git bash. Using git bash, you can create local repository. Git bash download பண்ணோம்ல, அதை base பண்ணி you can create the local repository. So how to create remote repository? Tortoise git, SVN. இதெல்லாம் என்னன்னா git clients. Number 1 is git bash. Second thing is tortoise git. Third one is SVN. SVN was an old technology. this tortoise git client. This also you can install. If you don't want git bash, you can also install tortoise git. ரெண்டும் கிளைண்ட் அது பேசிக்காக ஒரு ஆப். ஸோ அப்ளிகேஷன் அதுதான் என்ன பண்ணோம், லோக்கல் ரெபாசிட்டரி கிரியேட் பண்ணும். அங்கே தான் நம்மளால வெர்ஷன்ஸை மேனேஜ் பண்ண முடியும், வெர்ஷன் பண்ண. So next thing is very important. We are going to see how this workflow is happening. See, as a user, I don't want to bother about all these version controls, everything. As a user, as a developer, or as a tester, as an automation tester, what's your role? So role is to develop or work on a particular task where you can do daily task and push the changes to the central repository. This is my end objective, and you should know how this workflow works first. Okay, this is called as Git life cycle. The next thing is very important. You should know how the Git life cycle works. Okay, Git life cycle na enna, adu eppadi work agudundra paakalama. So what is the outcome of Git lifecycle, and what you will be learning in Git lifecycle is from a code level. You are preparing some code, how the code is being managed and how it is being saved in the central repository. What are all the changes it is going through? That is what we are going to see. That is called as Git lifecycle. Okay, this is very important in terms of interview or everything. Git lifecycle is very important. The place where you are actually coding is called as what? நம்ம கோட் டெவலப் பண்றோம்ல, அந்த பிளேஸ்க்கு பேர் என்ன? What's the place? Eclipse example you are using IDE, integrated development environment. So what is that? See, you are developing some code in a particular local storage location. So you are using some local storage location to develop some code, to develop some application, correct? Example, you are using Eclipse. In Eclipse, you are choosing the workspace. Workspace is what? The local location. That location is called as current working directory or project working directory. Sometimes it is referred as current working directory, CWD or PWD, project working directory. நீங்க எங்க work பண்றீங்களோ அந்த பிளேஸ்க்கு பேர் என்ன? Project working directory or current working directory, என்ன வேணாலும் வச்சுக்கோங்க. இங்க தான் இந்த ஃபைல்ஸ் எல்லாம் டெவலப் பண்றோம். You are doing development or you are doing configuration, whatever it may be, but where you are actually working, the place is called as project working directory. This is your local disk, the space in your local disk, correct? I need to move this code to the remote repository. Remote repository is hosted in where? It is hosted in some server, some cloud server. What in our case, what is the remote repository we are using? We will be using GitHub. GitHub is called as remote repository. Say for example, in the GitHub login pantama, this GitHub is called as remote repository. Shall we create an empty repository here? How to create an empty repository? Empty repository means there will not be any file. I will be creating an empty repository for this. How to create an empty repository? Different ways. We will create using new or option irukka. Git repository, GitHub login panna udane, you will be getting a blank page. You will not see all these things. These are all the repository created by myself. Okay, I have so many repositories created for different projects, different things. Okay, but in your case, what you need to do? You will not be getting anything. You need to create an empty repository. That is your remote repository. How to create this? The plus symbol irukilla, you poi new repository. Provide any repository name called DevOps. This can be public and private also. When you say private, you can only access, and those who are providing access or those who are having proper access can access. Public is open to anyone. On sharing this, anyone can clone your code. யார் வேணாலும் எடுத்துக்கலாம். So that is called as, if you want to add a readme file, you can add, and all other options are default, and create the empty repository called DevOps batch 55. இதுக்குள்ள பாருங்களேன், ஏதோ ஃபைல்ஸ் இல்லைல்ல, you don't see any files here. These are all instructions, but you don't see any files. Okay, consider I have one file in my local. How it has to be pushed to this remote repository? I have one file in my local. I want to push the same file in this remote repository. That is what we are going to do now. Shall we see? Yes. For that, you need to understand the Git life cycle. My file is present in project working directory, current working directory, that is in your local. So we need to see how we are going to move the file into remote repository. இப்போ இங்க என்கிட்ட ஒரு ஃபைல் இருக்கா, ஏதோ லோக்கல் லொகேஷன்ல ஒரு ஃபைல் இருக்கு. சாரி, லோக்கல்ல எனக்கு கொஞ்சம் ஃபைல் இருக்கு, ஏதோ ஒரு ஃபைல் இருக்கு, ஜாவா, நான் ஜாவா, எக்ஸல், ட்ராக்கர், ஏதோ ஒன்று இருக்கு. அந்த ஃபைலை நான் அந்த ரிமோட் ரெபாசிட்டரி புஷ் பண்ணணும். அதை எப்படி பண்றதுன்னா பார்க்கணும். In your case, you are having Java project in your local. The project has to be pushed to remote repository. Why it has to be pushed to remote repository? So that others can go and use it. Others can go and use it. If any changes are coming in, all other peoples can work and work. I mean, you can merge the code at the end of the day. You can merge the code and final product can be delivered. For example, நான் உங்களை ஒரு ஆட்டோமேஷன் இல்லை ஜாவா ப்ராஜெக்ட் கிரியேட் பண்ண சொல்கிறேன். கிரியேட் பண்ணிட்டீங்க, கால்குலேட்டர் அப்ளிகேஷன் டெவலப் பண்ணிட்டீங்க, புஷ் பண்ணிட்டீங்க. கால்குலேட்டரில் இன்னும் சில ஃபங்க்ஷனாலிட்டிஸை ஆட் பண்ண சொல்கிறேன். I'm asking you to add few more functionalities. What will happen? Example, the calculator function initially developed by Pallavi, not Yogesh. So Yogesh, this time Yogesh has to do the new enhancement. அதுக்கு நீங்க என்ன பண்ணணும்? You need to pull the code from the remote repository. So then you need to work, and again you need to commit the changes. Another day, Pallavi wants to fetch your changes, means she can fetch. Whatever the changes done by yourself can be fetched by Pallavi. So all these actions are possible by following this Git life cycle. So I told you, we are going to follow distributed version control system. So what is the latest version control system we have is distributed version control system, where you will be having the concept of local repository. So in between you need one more person, that is called as local repository. Okay, in the project working directory, consider I have one text file, test.txt. I have only one file called test.txt. I want this to be pushed to remote repository. The first step what I need to do is I need to commit this file into local repository. From local repository, this needs to be pushed to remote repository. So straight away you cannot commit your changes to the local repository. You need one more layer. That is the imaginary layer. It's not exist in physical. I mean, it's an imaginary layer. The layer name is called as staging area. Index or staging area. Staging area. The பேர் என்ன? Staging area. ஓகேவா? This is called as index ன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க, or staging area ன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. What was the use of staging area? Any guess? Staging that ready to push. Any other guess? Index or staging? Indexing, staging. Stage. First. So staging, until staging stage, your files are not tracked by anyone. Correct? After staging area, files will be tracked. Tracked means whatever the changes you are doing on the same file will be tracked. And for each and every changes, sorry. So for each and every changes, there will be a version maintained. So who is responsible in doing this tracking functionality is done by indexing or staging area. First நீங்க அந்த ஃபைலை என்ன பண்ணணும், staging ஏரியாவுக்கு புஷ் பண்ணணும். I mean the process of adding the files into index or staging area is called add. The functionality பேரு add ன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. Whatever the new files you create or whatever the files that you make changes, you need to add it to staging area. If you are not adding to staging area, what will happen? The files will not be tracked. அதில் பண்ணுற சேஞ்சஸ் வந்து ட்ராக் ஆகாது. ஓகேவா? எக்ஸாம்பிள் test.txt ஒரு ஃபைல் இருக்கு. Initially you are having one line of code. You are committing to local repository. In the next day you are coming and adding one more line. So that is called as version 2. Correct? You are making some change. Who's responsible in tracking all the changes? The staging area. For each and every change, there will be a unique code generated. For unique code generate ஆகும். That code is called as hash code. ஒரு ஃபைலுக்கும், for each and every file in your project, whenever you are doing change, there will be a unique code generated. That code is called as hash code. Okay, what is the first process you need to do? In the current working directory, I have only one file. I need to push this code into remote repository. What is the first thing you need to do? You need to add this test.txt into index area or staging area. First add பண்ணலாமா? Index or staging area add பண்ணிட்டோம். எந்த ஃபைல்ல? ஒரே ஒரு ஃபைல் தான் இருக்கு என்கிட்ட, test.txt. இது எப்படி ஆட் பண்றது? we'll see. Using git client we are going to add. But அதை எப்படி ஆட் பண்றதுன்னு பார்க்கலாம். This process is called as what? Add. Add பண்ணதுக்கு அப்புறம் index area will watch the file carefully. He is the security. Here you will see whatever the items you are carrying, each and every time it will scan the file. Whatever the changes you are having. ஒரு நாள் மார் வேஷத்துல வரியா இல்லை நார்மலா வரியான்றதை பார்க்கறது இண்டெக்ஸோட வேலை, ஸ்டேஜிங் ஏரியாவோட வேலை. From index, the file needs to be committed to local repository. Local repository it has to be committed. What is the second life cycle? Second step in your Git life cycle is commit. The process name என்ன? Commit. Clear? Process name commit. Sorry, still my mouse. Very difficult. So whatever is the portion that you see left hand side of this line is called as the local area. That is completely with your machine. உங்க லேப்டாப் உங்க மிஷின்ல ஹேண்டில் பண்ற ஐட்டம் தான் லெஃப்ட்ல இருக்கிறது. ரைட்ல இருக்கிறது ரிமோட் ரெபாசிட்டரி. ரிமோட் ரெபாசிட்டரி இஸ் GitHub which is hosted service. ஆல்ரெடி ஹோஸ்ட் ஆயிருக்கு. நம்ம ஒரு empty repository create பண்ணிட்டோம். We have created one empty repository. Now my file is committed into where? Local repository. It has to be moved to remote repository. So moving the file from local repository to remote repository is called as push activity. இதுக்கு பேர் என்ன? Push. புரியுதா உங்களுக்கு? யோகேஷ் புரியுதாடா? சுதாகர்? Frederick, hi, welcome.
Yeah, bro. Thank you.
So this is how you need to do. For pushing a single file, you need to first add it to the staging area. From staging area, it needs to be moved to commit. Using commit, you need to move to local repository. From local repository, it needs to be pushed to remote repository. Shall we create one file and shall we push into the remote repository which we have created? Yes. Okay. Do I have any files in the remote repository now? So in the remote repository பாருங்களேன் இதுல எதனா files இருக்கா? Do you have any files here? No, I don't have any files. So which is your target remote repository? This one, DevOps batch 55 is my target remote repository. So you need to keep this clone of this repository into your local first. What is the first thing you need to do? You need to keep the clone of this repository into your local. Then you add files, commit files and push it to the remote repository. This is one way. Second way is you can create your own new repository also. So add it to your local repository first and create a new repository and push it. One is clone. What is clone? What is clone is doing is, see, whatever the remote repository you have, that can be cloned to your local. By there, you will be getting the copy of your remote repository. Whatever the files you have in remote repository, same will be available in your local. But as of now, I don't have any files added. So when you clone, you will not be getting anything of it. So first we will see how to create a simple file, add it to the index area, then we'll commit. Finally, we'll try to push. Okay. For this, I'm going to use git bash. For performing local repository actions, I'm going to use git bash. Range. Okay, this positive flow is fine, right? I mean, onward flow is fine, right? So from current working directory to remote repository, how the flows, இது ஒரு life cycle. So we'll see if you are newly joined to the team and your project team has already have the repository, remote repository இருக்கு. I mean, you are having a project already. How do you how do you pull the code into your local machine? So that process is called as clone. What is clone? Having the copy of remote repository of files in the local system. For doing clone, we need to use a command called clone அப்படின்னு ஒரு command யூஸ் பண்ணும். git clone அப்படின்ற ஒரு command வந்து யூஸ் பண்ணும். It's a copy. It's purely a clone. Clone means it's a copy. Okay. Now you have a copy. Okay, and consider developer 1 is pushing some changes to the remote repository, but you are a new member. You will not get that change, right? You have already copied. நேத்து copy பண்ணி வச்சிருக்கீங்க, but remote repository has been updated. Now some files have been changed inside the remote repository. How do you fetch those files into your local repository again? So do you need to clone it again? No, cloning is not required for the second time. You need to pull the code. So there is a concept of pulling. What do you mean by pulling? Pull means what? Fetching the latest or updated code from the remote repository to which area? Project working directory. Till project working directory, you will be able to pull the code. So this process is called as pull. The process பேர் என்ன? Pull. There is one more command we need to use called fetch. Any idea about fetch? Fetch என்ன பண்ணும் தெரியுமா? என்ன பண்ணும்? Similar to pull. It is also similar to pull, but there is a difference. So fetch will update everything into local repository. From remote repository, it will fetch the changes and that will be updated in your local repository. Local repository la fetch பண்றதுக்கு பேரு தான் fetch. From remote repository to local repository is called as fetch. Example, index update ஆகிறது, புதுசா ஒரு branch. Example, in the remote itself, I am going and creating a new branch. How those branches will reflect in local repository? You need to fetch the code. Fetch means it will fetch the origin plus branch information and other information. இதெல்லாம் எடுத்துட்டு வரது பேர் தான் fetch. I want to know the difference between the code which is there in staging area and in my local machine. Consider I have added one test.txt in the staging area. Staging area is there in staging area. After that, I am making some change in test.txt. Locally, I am making some change, but the changed file is not yet added to staging area, and I want to understand what is the difference I have done between the staging area and the current working directory. For this, we need to use one command called diff. Diff is a difference. Diff talks about the difference between the file which is added in staging area and is called as diff. From local repository to the current working directory, if you want to pull the code, that process is called as checkout. That process is called as checkout. So checkout can be also used for switching out the branches. Branch switch பண்ணனும்னாலும் checkout வந்து பண்ணணும். So checkout எப்படி work ஆகும்? From local repository to your current working directory, if you want to pull the changes or if you want to switch the branches, you need to use the checkout command. ஒரு கமெண்டா பார்க்கலாம், ஓகேவா? I'll be explaining every command detailing. Don't worry. So check out and put. So this entire thing is called as what? Git lifecycle. Git lifecycle. So as a beginner, for a DevOps, usually you guys won't do much with the code related things, right? Yeah, I mean, you will not work on code actually. So, but it's your responsibility to know how they are committing the changes and how they are pushing the changes to remote repository. There should not be any multiple changes should not be happening on the same file every time. And you need to check the quad quality using Sonar Cube and other things. So so only for lookup purpose, it is better to know about Git and GitHub life cycle. You should watch. I mean, on the quality perspective, you should see how developer or automation tester is pushing the code in Git or GitHub repository. In case if you are adding some configuration file in the project which they are working, example, you want to add Jenkins file. Jenkins file won't be prepared by developer or automation tester. It should be done by DevOps team. So you may need to clone the development team's project. So that time you need to know all these things. Correct Jenkins file இருக்கட்டும், YAML file இருக்கட்டும், or Docker file இருக்கட்டும். So all these things, what you are doing, you are taking out the help of, or you are taking the use of the project team's repository, project team's project. So அதனால it is better to know about the Git life cycle. Okay. Now I'm going to create a simple file, and using this file, we'll see how to push this file into the remote repository. Till this, any doubts? Git life cycle. You understand what is distributed version control system and how the Git life cycle works. These two topics clear. உங்களுக்கு இது பண்ணி பார்க்கலாம்டா, புரியும். உங்களுக்கு பிரச்சனை